Hello and welcome to Title Sports Network. It's Seb Parkinson here with Dan Rafael. We're just having a bit of a joke before we started that our clothing matches the branding of Title Sports Network. So, Dan, how's it going? Long time no speak. Been a week?
Everything is good. We got a lot to talk about, my man.
Yes, we have indeed. So we'll kick off with Chocolatito, who made his return for the first time since December 2022, winning the fight by TKO in round 10. Dan, what did you make of the fight, and what's next for Chocolatito?
Well, I was super happy to see him back in action. Just one of the all-time great fighters, certainly among the smaller weights, from straw weight to junior bantamweight, probably in the top 2 or 3 of all time, no question about it. But he put on a good performance. I mean, for a guy that's been out of the ring that long, I was kind of pleasantly surprised how good he looked. He was fighting a competent opponent in Rober Barrera, not a bum or anything, not a top guy, but a guy that was fought for a title before, been in the ring with a lot of fighters. What I found interesting about it to some degree is that now Chocolatito Gonzalez can say, I am 2-0 against the Barrera family, because years ago he knocked out his brother in another fight that they had. So good to see him back in action. He was fighting technically as a bantamweight, although the contract limit was 117, but that's partly because as a fighter in Roman, who had won titles in the 105, 108, 112, 115, his sort of thought is, let me see if I can win a title in another weight class before I call it a day. That would be a big deal. So he was sort of testing out bantamweight, even though it's just a few pounds. So he looked good. It was exciting. Scored a couple of knockdowns. Really dished out a massive beating the second part of the fight. And now he looks to see what can be next. He hadn't fought since the third fight against his great rival, Juan Francisco Estrada. And now I think there'll be some opportunities for him, whether it's going to be in the bantamweight division, where he might be able to get a title fight lined up, perhaps for another fight in the junior bantamweight division. There was some conversation about his interest in fighting really what is his Tekin boxing stablemate, and somebody that he's friendly with and has sparred with, and that's Jesse Bam Rodriguez. I don't know if I love that fight, being that Jesse's a superstar on the rise at age 24, and Roman is this much older fighter, in the twilight of his career. But at bantamweight, he can win a fight, I would think, if he would challenge one of the title holders in that division, which are not on the same level in my mind as Bam Rodriguez. But he's going to have options. He's going to get at least one other big payday if that's what he wants. And good luck to him, because there's fewer things, Seb, in my boxing life that I have enjoyed more than watching and chronically and covering the career of Roman Chocolatito Gonzalez.
Janibek pulled out of his main event fight. We did a preview for that on Friday due to dehydration, which meant that fortunately the Raymond Muratalla Tevin Farmer fight, which was already a good fight anyway, was then upgraded to the main event. So just run us through that. How does a fighter end up getting so ill from dehydration?
Well, I mean, like every fighter that's not a heavyweight, he was in the process of making his weight Thursday night. And as his team explained, we were going through the same process we've always done. Janibek has been a middleweight his entire career. This is making 160 pounds is certainly nothing new for him. He was set to defend the unified title, and he got to a certain point in making the weight. And as their team said, we just couldn't get any lower. I am told by sources that were involved in the event that he had gotten down to about 162 pounds and could not shake the last 2 pounds, and was working hard to do it, and ultimately had that situation arise where he was taken to the hospital after he passed out. And obviously when that happened, he was not going to be allowed to fight. So he was out of the fight. And it's unfortunate because Mikhailovich, his opponent, who had come, as he talked about on the ESPN Plus stream in an interview with my buddy Mark Kriegel, look, I came 7,000 miles to try to win the unified title, and I didn't get a chance. So he was not happy about that. I'm told the Top Rank, while they won't pay him his entire purse, they will give him something for his trouble. I don't know how much, but you got to figure he's not walking away with zero. He'll get a few dollars in his pocket to at least make it worth the while to show up and do his job as a professional. And now, in the aftermath of that, the WBO, which is one of the sanctioning bodies that he holds the title in, they actually sent a letter on Monday to Janibek saying to Top Rank and to Janibek, you have 10 days to produce a medical report and to explain what's going on with your situation, so we can, assess the situation with the title. So if he can say that he's okay, and Janibek, if you look on his social media, he tweeted that he was out of the hospital. He's going to take a couple weeks off, and then he's going to get back in, and has every intention to still compete as a middleweight. If that's the case, then one would figure that fight stays intact, and they'll reschedule that mandatory fight. Mikhailovich was making the point on that interview, asked what he thought that they should do. He made the point they should strip him of the titles and give them to me. Now, that wasn't going to happen. You're still going to have to fight for them. But, he makes a valid point. I mean, if you don't make the weight, even without stepping on the scale. Why should that be different than if you stepped on the scale and you're overweight, you're stripped of the title? But if you don't even make it to the scale, you get to keep the title. So I totally understand that perspective. Hopefully, I mean, boxing is part honor. Seb, it takes two. Both guys have to do their job and come ready to fight and make the weight. And Janibek did not do that, whether it was on purpose or an accident or whatever you want to call it. It happened, and I don't think you should necessarily be rewarded for that. So I kind of I'm moving my perspective to being stripped if that happens, because as I mentioned, what's the difference if you can't make the weight and you pass out the night before than if you went to the weigh-in on Friday and stood on the scale and were 2 pounds over, a pound over, you'd get stripped. So I don't really quite see the difference at this point, but nonetheless, under the current rules, it seems as though he'll have the opportunity to reschedule that fight.
Yeah, it's interesting, actually. I'd never actually thought about it like that, because I guess if he passed out but then was still able to stand on the scales to prove that that was the case, then yeah, he would have been overweight, and then they would have took the title off him, and then he could have withdrawn from the fight. Whereas he's withdrawn from the fight now, still got his belt, as of the time of recording, that's the case, and he potentially has the opportunity to go again. I guess if they produce a medical report and they're not satisfied with it, they then might make that decision to strip him. But obviously, we don't know what that is the case until that becomes the case.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, they did say, obviously, as every organization does when they send these types of letters out. And if you get the letter, it's not like some secret. They actually posted it on the WBO website, that in the end, they have the right to do what is best. I forget how they phrased it, but they're going to make that decision. I mean, look, first of all, Janibek it's not like he has a history of missing weight. This is a guy that's been a good professional. He's been on weight for a long time. So, there is the benefit of the doubt where, you make that kind of mistake or that kind of situation arises and you're not totally punished for it. So I suspect that if he's being truthful and he just encountered a scenario where it just that happened for whatever the reason was, that he'll be able to keep the titles. And I guess in the end, they'll probably reschedule the bout.
Yeah. So then moving on to the what became the main event there, Muratalla versus Tevin Farmer. We talked about this in the show last week. We said it was actually a really good fight. Muratalla obviously is going to be looking ahead to Lomachenko's and people of that ilk now with the win. What I want to talk to you about, though, is on the scorecards, they weren't as wide as I thought they would have been when I watched the fight back. One of the judges actually had it 94-95, which Tevin Farmer got a point deducted in, I think, round 8 for holding. Now, had that not been the case, he would have scored it a draw. But from what I saw, it looked like Morataya was just faster. He was more clinical. He landed more. He landed faster. And he stunned him in round 10. I actually thought when I was watching it, because I'd not seen the result by this point, that he was going to stop. He stopped him, and then he managed to go to the end. And I just thought the scorecards were a little bit closer than I felt they were when I was watching it.
Well, you mentioned one of the scorecards was in fact 95-94. So of course, if he doesn't get the point taken off for the excessive holding, and by the way, they were both warned for holding. Some of the broadcasters were critical of referee Thomas Taylor for taking away the point. And I understand that, especially in a close fight. But also, I look at from the point of view that both of these men had been warned on more than one occasion, in my recollection. And at some point, you got to take the point. So, that's not the ref's fault. That's the boxer's fault for the holding. But in the end, that fight, that point deduction, rather, did not impact the ultimate outcome. It would have simply changed it from a unanimous decision to a majority decision. So you still don't win the title, is the end, or win the fight, I should say. So that was a close card. The other cards I'm looking at here, 97-92, 96-93. Here's the reality: Tevin Farmer was ahead in that fight through the 7th round on 2 of the scorecards. He was ahead on all 3 scorecards after 5 rounds. But what separates the winner from the loser is the fact that Ray Morataya legitimately went and won the last several rounds of the fight without a question. And then you mentioned in round 10, had a chance to get a knockout. He really badly hurt Tevin with the right hand, rocked him very, very right on the chin. There was still I actually was looking at the score bug on the clock when that happened. It was 1 minute and 8 seconds left. And then with about 30 seconds left, he hit him with another right hand. It wasn't as powerful and as damaging as that first one, but it still rocked him again. And you're thinking, okay, he still may get the knockout even with 30 seconds left. Farmer's a good pro. He's experienced. He was able to survive the crisis. But in the end, if you had any particular thought that maybe Farmer pulled out the fight, I don't think that's possible once you saw what happened in round 10, because quite honestly, that was by far the biggest round that Farmer had. If you really wanted to be super, super liberal, I didn't do this, but it wouldn't totally shock me if you saw the occasional judge make that a 10-8 round without a knockdown. So look, in the end, Morataya, he did what he was supposed to do. He's a young up-and-coming fighter, undefeated, right on the cusp of a world title fight. They put him in the ring, Top Rank does, with the best opponent of his career by far in Tevin Farmer, an experienced, slick guy with a lot of experience who knows how to handle himself against any kind of opponent, who's got some good wins on his record, who's actually been active after a very long layoff. He's now won 3 fights in a row since coming back after a lengthy layoff, including a fight just several months ago. So not a guy that was coming off some crazy long layoff. Anyway, all those things taken into account, the kid Morataya did exactly what he was supposed to do. He showed the heart and the ability to overcome some confusion. I thought he was very perplexed, let's say, by the southpaw style and the slickness that Farmer had in those first handful of rounds. And he got himself together. He adjusted. As corner man, Robert Garcia was tremendous. Was telling him exactly the right thing about in terms of make sure you pressure him. After round 7, he recognized that they really needed to pick things up, and he was all over him. And Muratalla is a good student. He listened to the coach, and he went out there and he did the job. And so he gets credit. He did what he was supposed to do. He came back. He took care of business in those last few rounds. In my opinion, left no doubt about it. And he won a close fight, a competitive fight. Not a particularly great fight, but he did the job. And you know what? If you're a supporter of Ray Muratalla, you're going to look at that result. You say, you know what? Okay, that was a very big test to pass, to beat a slick, tough opponent like that, and to do it in the manner in which he did it.
So what next for him then? Is he going to go for that big name, top 4? Because he's top 5, isn't he, I think, in the world at the moment?
Yeah, he's highly rated in a lot of the organizations, to my understanding. And if you take a look at his past situation, Top Rank had made him one of the options for Teofimo Lopez when he defended the junior welterweight title back a few weeks ago. Lopez opted for Steve Claggett, but they had put Murataya's name in that possibility, even though it was a different weight class. So now he still has a lightweight. He wants to fight for a title. I mean, if you have Tank Davis and Lomachenko negotiating with each other, so it looks like they're probably going to get that done and fight in the fall. That would eliminate either of those guys from consideration. And I don't think that, Gervonta Davis not looking at Muratalla, who's not a big name or anything like that. Lomachenko might have been more possible because of the Top Rank aspect. They're both with the same team. But what he said after the fight, and this would be okay, I'd be down for this. He said that he wanted to fight Dennis Baranchyk, who won the WBO title not that long ago, and that he had made the point that Baranchyk had said his name, put his name in his mouth, and so I'm calling him out too. So that's a fight that maybe we could see, I suppose. Either way, whether it's the next fight or it's in 2 fights, Muratalla is right there, ready to fight for a world title, it seems to me.
Do you think he's a stronger contender in that top 5 as the rest of them? Would you say he was the weakest of the top 5, or do you think that he's got something to prove? He's 27. I'm just looking at the box rec rankings. You've got Tank Davis, Shakur Stevenson, William Zepeda, Vasyl Lomachenko, then Raymond Morataya. Then you've got Berinchyk, Navarrete, and then he goes on down from there.
I mean, he fits in that picture, in that group of guys. I mean, I'm not sure I would necessarily rank him ahead of Berinchyk at the moment, or necessarily ahead of Navarrete, even though he had his issues. And actually, Navarrete is going back to 130 pounds anyway, so you probably can take him off the lightweight list, at least for this time being. But he's in the mix, deservedly so, at that level. The lightweight division is, at one time, was a little bit more populated with top guys. Because Teofimo was there, and you still had Devin Haney was in that division, and you still had Ryan Garcia in that division. But those fighters have moved on and moved up, and so it's sort of been a situation of attrition. And so because it has thinned out a little bit over the last, say, year and a half or so, you have Moratalla, who a year and a half ago wouldn't be in that conversation, but at the present time, he's now in that mix, along with like Berinchyk and having won that title and everything. So, listen, he's ready to fight for a title. I mean, they'll do what they can do to get him the shot. I think the Berinchyk fight makes sense because Berinchyk can probably make a bigger purse in that fight, because it's not like Tank Davis or Lomachenko are available to him for a unification fight at this point. So you tell me what else is in there in the lightweight division for him to do. Shakur Stevenson has the other title in that division. We'll talk about him. The Berinchyk fight is unlikely to happen. That's not a big fight for Shakur. So if you take a look at those options. Now, the one thing that Morataya said was, if I can't get Berinchyk, give me Shakur. Easier said than done. If Shakur was going to stay with Top Rank, maybe they could make the fight. But that seems to be pie in the sky at this point because he's now a free agent.
Well, before we get into what's going on with Shakur Stevenson, we'll finish off this part and we'll talk about Jarron Boots Ennis versus David Avenesyan. Jarron Boots Ennis has been out of the ring for a year, coming back, facing David Avenesyan, a veteran of the game. We talked about it last week. I sort of talked up David Avenesyan a little bit, probably too much, but he retired at the end of round 5. From what I saw, it looked like the corner were pointing to his jaw, but from what you saw, Dan, just break that fight down. There's not much to break down in a way. Boots Ennis absolutely battered him.
I mean, as far as the stoppage goes, I guess officially it was the doctor that recommended to the referee to stop the fight, which the referee did. But as you mentioned, I haven't seen any diagnosis. I'm actually going to check and see if there was anything further about that. It did appear that the jaw was a bit swollen, so maybe there was either a fracture or some kind of dislocation or something like that. But clearly, at that point, the doctor, seemingly with an urging of the corner, made the call to stop the fight. He had put up a good fight, even though he had taken some shots. In the previous round before the stoppage, he had gotten knocked down and was starting to take a bit of a beating. Boots took a little bit of a round or two to get warmed up, but, this was as expected. I mean, I know you were bullish on Avenesyan, at least to hang in there for a while. But in the end, Avenesyan's a good pro. He gave it a good go. He took the fight on not optimal scenario. Not that he didn't have any time to train. It was about a month notice or so, because the mandatory Cody Crowley had been not medically cleared because of a previous eye surgery that was not allowed to fight. So, I give credit for Avenesyan. This is a guy that's gone to other guys' hometowns, never had a quarrel with that, fought Terence Crawford in Omaha, has fought other fights on the road, fought this fight in Philadelphia. So Boots did what he was supposed to do. I didn't think he looked spectacular. You can chalk that up possibly to being out for a year, possibly just for the hoopla and the craziness of having the hometown fight. But it was awesome to see a great fight town like Philadelphia have a real big welcome for their hometown champion. They turned out in droves for that fight compared to normal. If you take a look at the statistical breakdown, I can't say it's the biggest fight in the Philadelphia history or anything like that, but just in terms of the number of people that gave up their time, and obviously many of them money, even though some of them I'm sure were freebies. But the point is, they took their time to go out to the Wells Fargo Center. They had a crowd of a little over 14,000, like 14,100 and something. That's the biggest boxing crowd for a professional fight in Philadelphia. You got to go all the way back to 1978 at the very famous Spectrum building, where Marvelous Marvin Hagler had a non-title fight with Benny Briscoe. This is before Hagler was the middleweight champion, and they put about 14,900 in that building. So that should tell you how starved really Philadelphia is for big-time boxing, where they can bring their world champ home and give him a homecoming. And he was something he wanted to do. He was very excited about it. And I'm telling you, Eddie Hearn, as well as I do, he notices that. They see that. They know they can put fights on. If you can draw that kind of crowd for a David Avenesyan, that you probably could go through that crowd of 14,100 and whatever, and probably 14,100 and whatever had never heard of David Avenesyan. Imagine what they could do if they actually were to bring a more well-known, reputable, bigger profile fighter to challenge him in Philadelphia. So he's going to have a home base. They're going to do some good things there, and it was exciting to see. So I'm really happy to see that Boots is now in a scenario where he can be more active. Eddie wants to get him back in the ring probably November, December. Seems reasonable to me. And just, do your thing and see what you can do. Let's see how far you can take it. I'd like to see him get an opportunity to fight a better grade of opponent, a unification fight perhaps, because the massive outpouring of how great he is, he's super talented. I'm not denying that, but it doesn't quite measure with what he's accomplished so far. I'd like to see him get the chance to prove it a little bit more.
Yeah, well, we will talk about what's next for Boots Ennis in part 2, but for now, we'll be back in a sec. Welcome back to Title Sports Network with me, Seb Parkinson, and Dan Raphael. Dan, bit of news that came out overnight for me, I think maybe late at night for you, was that Naoya Inoue to defend against TJ Doheny. TJ Doheny, an Irishman fighting out of New South Wales in Australia, the monster versus the power.
This is not a mandatory fight. This is an optional defense, which is something that's perplexing to me and some others, not because anything that's wrong with Inoue. It's that after he knocked out Luis Nery in his previous fight in that huge crowd at the Tokyo Dome and survived his first ever knockdown, You had one of his mandatory challengers, Sam Goodman from Australia, in the ring, making it look like they were going to fight next, and Inoue was engaging with them. And then you had the WBA order their mandatory fight against MJ Akhmadaliev, who was the former title holder, and they had given them 30 days to make a deal, and suddenly that wasn't happening. Now, Doheny, who was a former title holder in his own right, he had fought on the Neary undercard and scored a knockout, and sort of seemed like that was what everybody was planning all along. The WBA, for whatever reason, just did not follow up on the mandatory order. You have the MJ team sending them a letter, being like, "Hey, what's up, guys? This is our fight. You can't skip us." Making a big deal about it. Citing past legal precedent, etc. But nonetheless, he's fighting TJ Doheny and defending his undisputed title. Now, I guess the WBA theoretically could strip him, but they're not going to do that. So this fight goes forward. It will take place in December, and they're going to have another big crowd at the Ariake Arena in Tokyo, where he has fought. This will be his fourth fight. What is this? His fourth fight in his last 5 fights, I believe, in that building. And he's going to be, the biggest star in Asia, one of the best fighters pound for pound in boxing. Most people would say, if you take a look at the landscape, there's really the upper tier of pound for pound. It's Inoue, it's Usyk, it's Terence Crawford, in whichever order you put them. They're like the ultra top tier, so he's in that group, and then it's everybody else. He's a spectacular fighter, and he's taken on Doheny, who I don't really think has much of a chance. I'm sure I'm not alone in that respect, but the one thing about Doheny that could be a feather in Inoue's cap, so to speak, is that this is a guy, even though he's got some losses and is on the back end of his career, he has never been stopped before. So that might be something for Inoue to shoot for, because we know he's a devastating puncher, particularly to the body.
TJ Doheny is 37 years of age, four defeats in his career, 0 stoppages, and his last 3 of his last 4 fights, this one being the fourth, have all been in Japan. Moving on then, Shakur Stevenson has been ordered to fight William Zepeda. Now, we talked about this on a previous show. We sort of expected that would be the case. It's now been official. We talked earlier about Shakur Stevenson and the situation with Top Rank. It's now been suggested that Eddie Hearn is going to sign Shakur Stevenson. He's got a 3-fight plan. What do you know about this, and does it make sense?
Well, it's very interesting because if you back up just a little bit ago, a couple of weeks ago, Shakur had his last fight under his Top Rank contract. He'd been with Top Rank his whole career. He goes home to Newark, New Jersey. He wins the fight against Artem Hartunian. Wins basically like every single round. Was not a very exciting fight. Took some criticism for having a second fight in a row that was sort of less than thrilling. Didn't get the knockout, which I don't fault any fighter for not getting a knockout. I mean, sometimes you're not going to knock a guy out. But anyway, after that was over with, the question was, okay, he's now a free agent. What's he going to do? So within the first couple of days of that free agency, he's talking to Oscar De La Hoya about the possibility of doing something. He's talking to Eddie Hearn about something. He met with Eddie in person up in Philadelphia, where Eddie was promoting the Boots Ennis fight, and Shakur went and sat with him. They were sitting at ringside together, and Eddie did talk about the type of scenario that he'd like to lay out for him, including a Zepeda fight. Now, because Zepeda has been ordered as the mandatory, it shouldn't be an issue about who's his promoter, can we make the fight, what's the broadcaster, because at the end, the organization, if they can't make a deal, they have a purse bid, and then whoever bids the most money gets the fight. Now, Zepeda is in a very interesting situation. He is in a rare situation of being ranked number 1 by all of the sanctioning bodies at the same time. So he's going to be able to sort of pick and choose. But the WBC is the first one that specifically said you are the mandatory. And plus, if you ask me, it seems to me that the most money Zepeda could make for a fight in his next bout, and be it for a title, would certainly be against Shakur, because I'll go back to what we talked about earlier. If you take a look at the landscape and you see that it's Lomachenko and Tank Davis probably going to get together and do a unification fight there, that takes them off the table for Zepeda, and neither one of them is going to be rushing to fight Zepeda anyway. And the other title holder is Baranchyk, who does not have that big of a name. Certainly that would not be as lucrative a fight as it would be with Shakur. It seems to me that's the most logical, biggest commercial fight, and a challenging fight for both fighters, because they fight in such completely opposite styles, where you have Shakur as the ultra smooth, slick southpaw, very defensive oriented, really, really super intelligent fighter, and just can outbox or box with anybody. And Zepeda, while not a bad boxer or anything like that, is nothing more. His biggest thing is, let me go straight ahead and try to just crush your skull, basically crush your body and knock you out, which is what he just did. And the other interesting thing about it was that on the same night that Shakur had the win against Hartunian, where he defended the title in Newark, New Jersey, it was William Zepeda in Southern California destroying Giovanni Cabrera in the third round with a massive onslaught of body punches. So they're on the same exact schedule. Now, he is with Golden Boy Promotions, so Oscar has said, I'd like to sign Shakur. If they can work something out, that would probably make that fight much easier to make. But if Eddie Hearn were to sign him, and they could either make a deal with Golden Boy or it could go to a purse bid. They're both on DAZN anyway, so in terms of the broadcaster, no issue there. And again, it's a long shot probably, but if you listen to Top Rank, and I've talked to Bob Arum, he's like, look, we love Shakur. We think he's a tremendous fighter. He's a gifted guy. We've had him his whole career, and we've enjoyed bringing him along. But, under the right circumstances, if it's a deal that made sense for both sides, we absolutely would be interested to re-sign him. I don't know if Shakur necessarily has interest in that, but it's not like Top Rank is shutting the door on it. They don't view it as any kind of adversarial situation. So if you've got Matchroom and you got Golden Boy and you got Top Rank, they're three of the biggest promoters in the business. Now, there's also been some chatter that maybe Floyd Mayweather and his Mayweather Promotions might look to get involved. Remember, Floyd, and he doesn't do this. When Floyd, he doesn't do this often. Back when Shakur was in the Olympic Games, Floyd Mayweather got on a plane and flew to Rio de Janeiro to be ringside to watch him. He wanted to sign Shakur out of the Olympics. It didn't end up panning out, but he's always had respect for Shakur's abilities. To a lot of people, he reminds people of the kind of style that Floyd fought in. Floyd just hired Richard Schaefer to be the new CEO of his company, who's obviously a very experienced and has been a very successful boxing promoter during his years with Golden Boy. So I wouldn't count them out necessarily. Shakur's going to have a lot of suitors, and that doesn't even, that's just about the guys that we're aware of. That's not to say there might be some other promoter out there. I don't know if anybody at PBC has contacted him, if anybody involved with Frank Warren has contacted him, if anybody involved with Riyadh Seasons has been interested to talk to him. So, right now, Shakur's in a good position because he can weigh his options and see what the best deal is in the longer term. But in the shorter term, it's probably going to be either a deal or a purse bid for a William Zepeda fight, which to me is a really fascinating fight.
You mentioned there about Riyadh Season. Turki Alalshikh, we believe, FaceTimed Eddie Hearn after the Boots fight to congratulate him. Basically, he said he wants to make Boots versus Crawford for 2025. But obviously, we've also heard that he wants to make Crawford versus Canelo. Crawford doesn't fight for August the 3rd. We've seen it before where, Turki Alalshikh has made a fight before a fight has taken place and it's fallen through. So do you think lightning will strike twice, or do you think that Crawford Boots or Crawford Canelo could potentially happen next year? And obviously on the expectation that Crawford beats Madrimov.
Any of those fights are possible depending on what the financials are, I guess. And, the thing about Turki Alalshikh is that he's a boxing fan. So he wants to see the biggest and best fights like we all do. So he can throw that out there. Now, I guess, you want to talk about just the sheer dollars. Obviously, Crawford, if he defeats Madrimov, that's a much bigger fight against Canelo than it would be against Boots Ennis. But the Boots Ennis fight's a really interesting fight in its own right. I mean, by all rights, when Crawford became the undisputed champion last July, when he knocked out Errol Spence, you had Boots Ennis was sitting there as the IBF's interim champion, and then the IBF ordered the fight. And Terence Crawford was not going to be forced into an immediate fight, right after he had just defeated Errol Spence. He wanted to kind of see what the landscape was. He was thinking he might move up in weight. So, he was stripped of the IBF title because he did not go through with that mandatory. Now, I don't in any way, shape, or form believe for one moment that Terence Crawford was ducking Boots Ennis. Terence Crawford has never ducked a fight in his life. I don't think he ever will. It just, at that moment in time, for a whole bunch of different reasons, did not make sense to go and make the match. And Ennis did not have even a fraction of the reputation he now has after what happened the other night. So he's going to do his thing. Now, could they meet up again? Obviously, it would be Boots would have to go to 154, which I don't think would be any particular issue for him. It's possible if Turki Alalshikh, wants to put up the money. I'm very confident that Eddie would be interested to do the fight. I'm very confident that Boots Ennis would be interested to do the fight. Terence Crawford is working with Turki Alalshikh on this fight against Madrimov, so they've dealt with each other. I'm sure that Turki Alalshikh knows the type of money that it would require for Crawford to fight that fight, or a Canelo type of fight. Canelo is probably coming back in September. I don't think there's going to be any kind of decision made in the immediate future about what's going to happen there. A scenario that I could see unfolding is that Matchroom does another Philadelphia fight, perhaps lines up a unification fight at welterweight for him in the next fight, say like in that end of the year time frame, and then maybe in the first fight of next year, perhaps they can arrange a Boots Ennis fight against Terence Crawford, or if everybody wins their upcoming fights, Crawford versus Canelo. I'm down for either one. They're different kinds of fights. But they're interesting for different reasons. The point is, there's going to be some big fights getting made if Turki is in the middle of it, because he wants to make big fights. Now, sometimes when you do that and you make the public declaration that this is the fight I want, stuff happens. A guy might lose. Look, they had it signed on paper, done deal for Anthony Joshua and Deontay Wilder. He made that fight after years and years of that fight being unable to be made. It wasn't Turki Alalshikh's fault that Deontay Wilder ended up losing on the same night that Anthony Joshua won his fight and prevented that from taking place. I just love the fact that the goal here is to make the biggest fights, and that it seems as though the money is not the biggest factor, that he'll make the fight that he wants to see, and that's a beautiful thing.
Right, well, we'll end it there, Dan. It's been a pleasure speaking to you on this lovely Tuesday night as I'm recording. It's going to go out Wednesday, this show. We'll be back on Friday. We're going to do a little preview of Jake Paul versus Mike Perry, and of course Amanda Serrano will return on that card. Not against Katie Taylor, unfortunately, but that will come later in the year. Dan, thanks for joining me. I'll speak to you again very soon.